Right bracket chapter 8. Order and disorder. Thus saith the Lord unto my servant Briam, call ye, upon the inhabitants of Zion, to organize themselves in the order of Enoch, in the new and everlasting covenant, according to the order of heaven, for the furtherance of my kingdom upon the earth, for the perfecting of the saints, for the salvation of the living and the dead. You can accommodate yourselves by calling this a new revelation, if you choose. It is no new revelation, but it is the express word and will of God to this people. Brigham Young, 1874, JD 17:154. In 1872 Brigham Young delivered a sermon in which he said, "If Babylon should happen to tip over so that we could not reach out and the necessaries of life, we should be in a bad condition. I want to put you in mind these things, and it is my duty to say to the latter-day saints that they should take measures to sustain themselves. They should lay a foundation for feeding and clothing themselves." JD 15:158. Right bracket within a year after this sermon, Babylon did tip over. A national depression hit the United States and reached its bottom by 1875 and didn't turn around until 1879. It was during these 6 years that people all over the country were trying to find ways of financial relief. On January the 11th, 1874, Brigham Young began to take active measures for establishing the United Order among the Mormons. At a meeting in the home of Erastus Snow in St. George, Robert Gardner gathered a list of about a dozen names of people who were willing to enter the order. Brigham said it was enough for a start. On February the 9th, Gardner was set apart as president of the new order, and on February the 15th, in a general meeting, Young told them it was time for all the saints to enter into that law. This was the beginning of a major change in the church, resulting in at least 220 different united orders. See Building the City of God, Arrington, Fox and May, pages 414 to 419. Brigham was thoroughly convinced that this was the time for the orders to be initiated. If we are disposed to enter the order of Enoch, now is the accepted time and blessed are the latter-day saints. But if we are not disposed to enter the order, the curse of God will come upon this people. I cannot help it. I will not curse them. But the time has come for this work to be commenced. Annals of the Southern Utah Mission, Book B, page 218. On March the 11th, 1874, from St. George, Brigham telegraphed instructions to the apostles in Salt Lake City concerning the United Order and its new re-establishment. Part of the telegram read, "Such as do not wish to join, treat them with all the kindness and fellowship as though they were in the order, for many will wish to wait and see what the result of acts will be. But those who have been preaching this order for 30 or 40 years need not wait any longer." Building the City of God, Arrington, Fox and May, page 204. After organizing the saints in St. George, Brigham recommended that the saints in Santa Clara enter into a cooperative system, where they could raise fruits and vegetables and crops best suited to low altitudes. Settlers in Pine Valley at high altitudes would raise grain and potatoes and other high-altitude crops. The saints in Washington and Price City were organized into the new order in February. Then in March, other new orders were established in Rockville, Virgin City, Tocqueville, Kanab, Johnson, Perrier, Mount Carmel and Glendale by Brigham Young, George A. Smith and John W. Young. Then Erastus Snow, Milo Andrus, and Angus M. Cannon went out organizing orders in the north and west, including Pine Valley, Pinto, Panaca, and Hebron. Orders were also organized this month at Morristown, Leeds, Harrisburg and Schunesburg. On April 6, 1874, Brigham Young and a large group of others, including George A. Smith, Erastus Snow, Milo Andrus, Angus M. Cannon, began their travel north. They held meetings in almost every right bracket town they entered and organized them into united order. They established orders in Bellevue, Kanawha, New Harmony, Cedar City, Parowan, Paragona, Beaver, Canosh, Fillmore, Holden, Scipio, Nephi and Payson. Their party reached Salt Lake City on April 20th. The central theme of their preaching was both spiritual and temporal. The saints were told to be self-sustaining and not import or buy anything that they could make themselves. They were not to have any poor among them. Everyone could labor in some way. Brigham advised, "Let some of the sisters take charge of the nursery to see that the children are properly fed, clothed, nursed and taught, and inculcate good order and conduct. Place good teachers in the schoolrooms and have beautiful gardens, and teach them to know and enjoy the beauties of flowers and plants and the uses, astringent, cathartic, aesthetic with beautiful colors. teach them lessons of beauty while young instead of playing in the dirt and mud. When old enough, place within their reach the advantages and benefits of a scientific education. Let them study the formation of the earth, the organization of the human system and other sciences. Mormon United Order in Utah, Dr. Angus Woodbury, page 10. The Order of Enoch spread in Utah, Wyoming and Idaho to include the towns of Bear Lake, Montpelier, Paris, Liberty, Ovid, Bloomington, St. Charles, Fish Haven, Laketown, Woodruff, Randolph, Army, Mallet, Clarkston, Mantua and others, also Pratt and John Taylor went south and organized others in Nephi, Murny, Mount Pleasant, Spring City, Ephraim, Fairview, Manti and Fountain Green. From Paris, Idaho, in the north, to Joseph City, Arizona, in the south, and westward to Bunkerville, Nevada, the united effort was effective in helping the saints out of the catastrophic depression of the Gentile economic system. The saints were catching the spirit and effects of equality, independence and improved economic affluence. While these orders were being established throughout these 4 states, many were also established within the wards of the Great Salt Lake Valley. The people were inexperienced and untaught on the plans or procedures for establishing or living a united order because so few men had any practice with it. Because these orders were established so quickly and the leaders had no time to be trained or educated in this economic system, each order had a different method of organization. However, the object of a self-sustaining cooperative was the same, in spite of the many different approaches. In some communities it was merely a loose cooperative undertaking, in other places it was highly communistic. In Hyrum, Cache County, for example, the people owned in common the sawmill, the tannery and the store, but the individuals owned the farms, the houses, and the cattle. In Price, Carbon County, on the other hand, the people lived together as one large family. Their farms, mills, horses, cattle, wagons, houses, and everything except the clothing they wore were owned in common. They all ate at the same table, and the women prepared the food and washed the dishes cooperatively. Mormon Group Life, Erickson, page 51. Within weeks new orders were organized throughout the state in Provo, Pleasant Grove, Spanish Fork, Lehi, Ogden, Plain City and other communities. Enthusiasm was contagious. Everyone seemed caught up in the spirit and desire to establish or belong to an order. Each conference and each Sabbath meeting was dominated with the subject, and the unity of temporal with spiritual was the theme. Brigham Young asked speakers to present arguments both for and against the United Order. Wilford Woodruff said the only argument he could give against the order was that it would prevent us from buying merchandise from our enemies. Apostle George Buchanan reported a visit he had with the order in Price, and described the unity and cooperation they enjoyed there. I spoke to the superintendent. How do you manage with your men? Are the brethren willing, when you require them to do anything, do they go with alacrity, or do you have difficulty in controlling them? Not in the least, said he. I have never made a requirement or asked a man to do a thing that he has refused to do, and in our farming they have worked well and patiently together, and they are satisfied with the right bracket arrangement. I spoke to others who worked there and made inquiries of them, and I found, in every instance, that there was a good deal of satisfaction in the arrangement. JD 17:238. Then Apostle Cannon mentioned traveling to a little settlement called Hebron, where about 30 families were living the United Order. In that settlement they have labored during this past season in the United Order, and they told me they had raised double the amount of crops they ever raised before, and all the labors are proportionately advanced, and this is the testimony of a good many settlements. JD 17:239. But after the first 6 months of organizing the saints into the United Order, the effort reached its zenith. From that point on, the church leaders had to constantly encourage them to continue with that program. The cooperative effort at Bryan City proved to be more successful than others. The organization drive seems to have come to a climax at the stake conference at Bryan City on June the 28th. Brigham Young, George A. Smith, Daniel H. Wells, Orson Pratt, Wilford Woodruff, John Taylor and Erastus Snow were all there. Here was Bryan City, which had been operating successfully several departments of a cooperative capitalistic system which they proposed to reorganize under the United Order system. The change was easily made and continued to function just as effectively under the system. The organization was now practically completed. The General United Order of Zion had stake branches in nearly all the stake headquarters. Each stake had many branches in the various wards or settlements, some stakes reporting that every ward had a United Order branch. The personnel of the United Order was in the majority of cases identical with the church officials. The presidents of the stakes were in most cases heads of the stake branches of the order, and the bishops of the wards were usually selected to head the ward branches of the order. This produced two mammoth organizations that were practically identical in personnel. One was a mechanical robot set up by the other. The Mormon United Order in Utah, Dr. Angus Woodbury, pages 12 to 13. Obviously, not everyone in the church belonged to a united order. Everyone was a free agent and could make his own decision to join or to remain out of these orders. Some wanted to wait and see if they succeeded or failed before they made a consecration. Brigham Young encouraged the saints to be rebaptized when going into this order, so they would realize that it was a high principle of the gospel that should be taken very seriously as a covenant with God. At Ephraim on June 27, 1875, the 31st anniversary of the martyrdom of Joseph and Hiram Smith, 7 of the 12 apostles were rebaptized. In the course of the next few weeks, thousands followed their example. Rebaptism did strengthen many of the saints. But for many others, the order of Enoch was just difficult to obey, and their efforts failed. However, in some instances the order was re-established as it was in Tocqueville. This community began a second time on August 18, 1875, with $7,000 to initiate a wine business. The remains of that winery still stand today. But every order had its days of trouble and sorrow. The strain of management, or else weaknesses in the members themselves, were too severe for most of the orders. All of them were operating with different degrees of success or failure. Some members had gone into it with a complete consecration, others still had private interests and businesses. Some consecrated all their time to the order, while others were only half into it. Part of the members wanted money for their wages. Some drew all of their credits out as soon as they earned them, while a few took only the very essentials to exist. The credit system was probably one of the greatest single problems in the United Order. Some thought it should be managed as a company with people drawing credits against their capital stock. Others thought it should be operated as a large family, each receiving what they needed regardless of their credits or debits. Strangely enough, both systems in some places did prove successful, while in others, it seemed to be the reason for division and failure. It was the complaining of the members that probably created most of the real trouble. Members would complain about the management, or their neighbors, or their personal treatment, or the way the tools were handled, or the livestock. They would grumble about those that were lazy, or had a better job, or the general conditions of the project. Complaints were common, both written and oral. Church headquarters was flooded with requests for answers to their problems. The efforts of church leaders now turned from recruiting members to the order to defending it and encouraging members to stay with it. In November of 1876, Brigham Young made his last journey to St. George for the winter. He was concerned about finishing the temple and holding the various orders together. Said he, "Brethren, with regard to the United Order, you are my witness that we did not ask for your gold, nor silver, nor houses, nor lands, goods nor chattels, nor anything else of property kind, but we ask for you, your time, your talents and all the ability that God has given to you, to enter into the United Order after the pattern of heaven to build up the Zion of God upon this land. You may not understand one fact that is before our eyes, that this temple in St. George is being built upon the principle of the United Order, and when we cease our selfishness, and our whole interest is for the building up of the kingdom of God on earth, we can then build temples and do anything that we want to with united voice and hands. Building the City of God, Arrington, Fox and May, page 168. In 1877 the St. George Temple was dedicated. Orders at Glenwood, Orderville, Richfield and Brime City were successful and prospering, but amidst these successes was the collapse of many others. Some had attempted stock or share companies, others were co-ops or total consecrations with dividends on surplus. Some were just small-type orders with only a few members, while others took in stakes or large territories. But Young's practical advice comprised a few rules for success. He explained, "I know how to start such a society right in this city and how to make its members rich. Would you like to know how to do this? I can tell you in a very few words: never want a thing you cannot get, live within your means, manufacture that which you wear, and raise that which you eat. Raise every calf and lamb, raise the chickens, and have your eggs, make your butter and cheese, and always have a little to spare. The first year we raise a crop, and we have more than we want. We buy nothing, we sell a little. The next year we raise more, we buy nothing, and we sell more. In this way we could pile up the gold and silver, and in 20 years 100 families working like this could buy out their neighbors. JD 1611. More than 200 different United Order programs were begun, but only a small number were successful for more than a few years. It has been estimated that during the first year of the organization of these orders, nearly half of them were unsuccessful. Time and space do not permit a detailed study of the many different orders of that period, but a short review of the rise and fall of some of them has been included. Brief histories on Kanab, Mr. Carmel, and St. George will occupy the balance of this chapter. The following chapter, A Glimpse of Success, will cover the more successful orders in Richfield, Bryan City and Orderville. Kanab. John R. Young arrived in Kanab on March 11, 1874, with a letter from Brigham Young and George A. Smith, authorizing him to establish a united order in the Kanab stake. The next day the people unanimously approved the order, and 367 people volunteered to join. Included among the volunteers was Tuba, a friendly Hopi Indian, who joined and gave his horse and colt. He was the first of his people to accept baptism, and the first to enter the United Order. The order was gradually built up to become a very prosperous and promising settlement. And at one time or another the following concerns appeared on the books: Kanab Lumber Company, the Sawmill Company, the Tannery and Manufacturing Company, the Brickyard, the Co-op Sheep Herd, the Sink Valley Ranch, and dairies at Cave Lakes, Swallow Park, and Buttermilk. Kanab United Order, by P. T. Riley, Utah Historical Quarterly 42:152. Difficulties, however, were soon encountered when the people were divided on the leadership of the order. Some chose to follow their bishop, Levi Stewart, while others contended that John Young was the president of the order. This became a major problem for everyone. One of the members of the order wrote in his journal, President Brigham Young sent a letter of instructions for the people to elect a president for the order, and said let him be bishop. Levi Stewart was then BP of the ward. As a member of the ward, I did not consider that we had any authority to change his position, and as John R. Young's authority as president of the United Order did not appear to be fully sustained in my mind, I voted for Bro. Stewart to be president and of course BP, which was sustained by the majority. J. R. Young having previously promised to sustain whoever was elected but failing in his promise, in a few hours another party was organized with him at their head as president of the order. Thus there was again a division of the people, there being two meetings held on the Sabbath day representing two parties, one under the direction of B.P. Stewart, and one under the direction of J. R. Young. Diary of William Henry Solomon. John R. Young wrote to President Brigham Young and gave a one-sided story of the division. Brigham must have discovered the reason for the trouble, and sent a letter back to John which settled the issue. John returned a letter of apology and his intention to decline any further presiding position. On August 8 a telegram came from the First Presidency of the Church, informing them that L. John Nuttall was being sent to replace Bishop Levi Stewart. This action would be the means of uniting the people together under one man, who would be both bishop and president of the order. Nuttall's ability and wise decisions soon united the people by employing chief members of both sides in high positions. Thus, 58 families were reunited. But a year later, when another reorganization took place, ill feelings were prevalent again. A strong feeling of dissatisfaction is showing itself in many members of the UO, which is a sweet morsel to the opposition party. There seems to be a crisis drawing near. Alan Frost Diary, August 24, 1877. On August 29, 1877, Brigham Young died and Nuttall had to go back to Salt Lake City to help unsnarl the properties of Brigham Young's estate from that of the church. Sextus Johnson, a mild-mannered and frail schoolteacher, became the new bishop and third president of the order. He was young, inexperienced and lacked the power to control the various factions. He later wrote to Nuttall and said that particular pains is taken to chastise me in public, and he desired to be released to go on a mission to Arizona, Mexico, or any other place. On June 8, 1884, Edwin D. Woolley was appointed as stake president, and Richard S. Robinson Wright was made bishop, concluding the organized effort of Kanab's United Order, and placing it back into ward/stake private enterprise system also, caused by transaction between members and non-members of the order. But it was the opening of public land in the area that made a final blow to the little colony. Mount Carmel. After organizing the United Order in Kanab on 11/1874, John R. Young set up an order on March 20 at Mr. Carmel, and 2 days later at Glendale. Mount Carmel was so named for its resemblance to the Mount Carmel in Palestine. The colonists of this order were composed of saints who had been on the muddy expedition in Nevada. They had suffered for several severe years and were trained in hard knocks. Even though these members suffered from crop failure, they were determined to succeed in their united efforts. Mount Carmel had its first major setback when the treasurer of the order, Henry B. M. Joly, announced his withdrawal. Brigham Young blamed the dissensions that occurred on Bishop James Leathead because of lack of firmness. Therefore, Howard Orson Spencer was sent down in September to replace Bishop Leathead as president of the order, the people voting to accept him at the November 6 conference. But Howard Spencer also had troubles with the order. Here the people were divided between the individuals of an acquisitive society and those communally minded souls reaching for a Mormon utopia. The first group simply would not accept the United Order as presented by John R. Young. Bishop Spencer, seeing the basic differences between them were irreconcilable, advised those of one mind to establish a new town. Accordingly, the advocates of the order began moving up the valley on February 20, 1875, and soon established Orderville. Bishop Spencer's Solomon-like decision not only satisfied the Jolyites at Mount Carmel, but allowed the opposing side a freedom of choice, which effected the formation of the most outstanding United Order to be spawned by the movement. The Kanab United Order. P. T. Riley, Historical Quarterly 42:156. Thus, the Mount Carmel Order was dissolved because of personal disagreements. St. George. St. George, so named for the Apostle George A. Smith, was the winter headquarters for Brigham Young. It was here that the United Order was first established and was therefore under the supervision of President Brigham Young. One of the first projects achieved was a program for consistency in the control and merchandising of goods in the importing and exporting from St. George, which was a central hub of exchange. It was also in a group 5 miles south of St. George that the first family form of the United Order was organized. Brigham Young offered to donate a large piece property, large enough for 500 to 1,000 people to settle upon, to start the business, to see if we can actually accomplish the affair, and show the Latter-day Saints how to build up Zion. JD 15:227. The St. George Order continued for about 3 years, after which money merely passed through the company and landed in the pockets of those who had donated or contributed the most. It was beginning to be a capitalistic stock market or shareholder profiteering, rather than a common cooperative. This course created ill feelings and caused many to desire disincorporation. After 6 years it, too, gave its death rattle and was gone. Thus, some of the joys and sorrows, successes and failures, can be seen by studying these communities. Even though some knew the theory was correct, it was very difficult for them to actually agree to the practice of the United Order. Brigham Young described this reluctance among some of the brethren. We organized every ward or town south of the rim of the basin, and left them in tolerably good working order, so far as they had advanced. The only trouble with them was, they did not understand. They would say, it is right, and the scriptures tell us about it, but we do not understand the mode of its operation. One man came to me, an old Mormon, whom I have known over 42 years, just as we were organizing, and said, Brother Brigham, I have preached for you all the time. I did the same for Brother Joseph. Brother Joseph preached this doctrine, is it not strange that the people do not see it? Then said I, you are ready to put down your name. His answer was, I will think about it. You do not fully understand your own faith, nor the doctrines you preach to the people if you do not understand this doctrine, and are not as ready to enter it as you would be to lay down this mortal body and enter heaven if God should call you, or to do any other duty. Suffice it to say, God will establish this order on the face of the earth, and if we do not help him, others will, and they will enjoy the benefits of it. JD 1743. Even Brigham Young himself, who knew the great blessings that could accompany the law of United Order, found difficulty in joining one. He enthusiastically once said, This is what I calculate to do, and I am going to do. Ask me if I am going into the order with all that I have. Yes, as I told them in a meeting not long ago, I'm going in with hat, coat, vest, pants, shirt, boots, and all I have. And if the question is asked, if your family do not go into the order, what are you going to do with your property? I am going to seal it up to the kingdom of God, for I do not mean that the enemies of the kingdom shall have a penny if I can help it. I want it appropriated for the salvation of the human family, to build temples, to sustain the families of the right bracket elders who go abroad to preach. I want it to be used for the good of the poor, and for the establishing of truth and righteousness on the earth. JD 18:248. That was June of 1874. By August of the same year he said, I am laboring under a certain embarrassment, and so are many others, with regard to deeding property, and that is to find men who know what to do with property when it is in their hands. JD 17:157. But Brigham never did find anyone that he thought was capable of handling his fortune. Within 3 years he was dead, and his estate was so entangled up with church property that it took a revelation to John Taylor to unscramble it to the satisfaction of his children. But most of the orders, like the church, were embroiled in financial and social problems. The orders had trouble getting the rich to join instead of all the poor. When the wealthy did join, they caused trouble because of the way their goods were being handled or used. Some of the members were lazy, incompetent, wasteful, or just outright dishonest. Then when they were chastised, they let their feelings take over. Many were filled with jealousy, envy, stubbornness, or pride. Some of the orders began to be run under the principles of priestcraft instead of the priesthood. The leaders would use funds and materials for their own benefit instead of that of the people in the order. The Lord had realized this would be a perpetual problem within any church or group, and he warned, and there shall not any part of it be used or taken out of the treasury, only by the voice and common consent of the order. D&C 104:71. When money or funds were taken from the treasury without the common consent or without being used for common benefits, the people were under a priestcraft and had a justifiable excuse for abandoning such a system. Within a few years of the inception of these united orders, most of them no longer existed. Nearly every community that tried and failed in the practice of the united order never made another attempt. Those principles have died in the pages of history, labeled as non-essential or as having been replaced. No effort or exhortation from the pulpit or the press could encourage the saints to become united in their economic social structure.